Hey there, my name is Laura Losner. I'm the Assistant Director of Field Education at the School of Social Work, and I'm going to talk with you about assessment of students' level of competency. This is basically where the rubber hits the road. It's where you get feedback from your field instructor and your faculty liaison about how you're doing in field. I'm going to walk you through how exactly we do assessment throughout each semester in the next few slides. Assessment of student progress, as you can imagine, is going to focus on both strengths and areas for improvement. So we're not just looking for where you might be making mistakes, but basically where you're doing well and you might refine skills, and where you might need some more support. We ask our field instructors to be very specific and descriptive in their evaluation of your performance so that you get the best possible feedback towards improvement. The other thing is that assessment happens throughout the semester. It isn't just at the end of the semester, but actually through supervision, process recordings, and other assignments that you may do in field. There are specific times where we do a more formalized assessment, both at the midterm and at the end of each semester. But the thing to remember is that when you're in field, you are always learning. You're always working towards trying to improve your performance, build skills, and hone and refine your technique. All of our assessments are also connected to the core competencies and behaviors. There are 9 core competencies in social work. Every student abides by these competencies, but they do break out into foundation and advanced levels. In the foundation year, there are 31 behaviors that you're going to be working towards competency in. The best way to become more familiar with the competencies is to refer to the handout that you probably have on the 2015 CSWE EPOS. This handout will give you an outline of all the competencies as well as the behaviors required for the foundation year and then for your advanced year in both clinical and macro concentrations. When we take a look at the assessment of student progress forms, which we call the more formalized assessment, those forms are found on the EFN. They're completed by the field instructor with a recommended grade of pass or fail. The thing to remember is that your field instructor and your faculty field liaison work as a team to help students do the best possible job they can in learning clinical and beginning social work techniques. There are 4 formal student assessments. There are 2 mid-semester assessments, one in the fall and one in the spring, and 2 end-of-semester assessments, one in the fall and one in the spring. The dates for those assessments are at the bottom of this slide. For a regular schedule, and in your advanced year, you may choose the extended option, which would be being in field for 2 days a week versus 3 days a week. And the dates there are the dates that you would have if you were an extended advanced student. Let's take a look at the fall mid-semester progress report. Essentially, the function of this assessment tool is to check in. How are you doing? Are you getting settled? Are you behaving professionally? Is your agency providing you with an appropriate opportunity so far? Have you begun seeing clients yet? It's not a formal assessment. It's really more of a check-in to see how well you're doing with regard to getting settled into your placement and getting started in working with clients. We ask your field instructor to indicate one of the following, whether or not your skills and competencies so far are performing satisfactorily, or if there are some concerns about whether or not you're adjusting to being in field. In the spring, we do a similar check-in kind of assessment. The difference between spring and fall, though, is that in spring, we're taking a look at how well you're doing and anything that you may need to address prior to the end of field. The spring semester progress report usually comes in February or March, and if you consider that field ends in the end of April, middle to end of April, then you're going to be looking at making sure that there is enough time between the mid-semester progress report and the end of the semester for you to be able to make some adjustments if needed. Sometimes our students do struggle with getting adapted to the field environment. And sometimes having a written plan can be very helpful and provide structure for students who are struggling. If concerns are indicated in either the fall or the spring midterm assessment, we typically recommend that the field instructor and liaison work with the student to come up with a performance improvement plan, or PIP. The performance improvement plan gives the field instructor, the liaison, and the student the opportunity to really clarify where the problems are, what practice behaviors they're related to, and what the plan is for improving whatever those issues are. We also ask for a timeline so that it isn't an arbitrary, let's fix it at some point, but actually a specific plan that will be checked in on within a specific period of time. The end of semester student assessment is where your grade comes from. Grading in field education is pass or fail. And we do ask for the end of semester student assessment to be a considerably more detailed evaluation of student progress towards achieving competency in those 31 behaviors. There are two parts of the assessment. The first part is checking in on professionalism, ethics, settling into placement, and professional identity. We're looking for feedback on whether or not the student has met all the requirements of the field experience with regard to attending field and completing assignments. We're also looking for how the student is interfacing with clients, other folks at the agency, adherence to policies, and that they're familiar with and abiding by the NASW Code of Ethics. We also want to find out if students have actively participated in their learning, whether they've approached supervision open to learning, they've come to supervision prepared, and are very open to the feedback they might get from a field instructor. If there are any students who are struggling in terms of professionalism in the field placement, the field office will review the student's performance, and the student may be referred to the student review committee for further evaluation of what those issues might be. The second part of the assessment is the much more detailed assessment that relates to the 9 competency areas and the 31 behaviors for the foundation year, or the behaviors for the clinical or macro specializations in the advanced year. It's in those areas where you will actually be evaluated on a Likert scale for your specific performance in those specific behaviors. The field instructor will take the first stab at it. Our expectation is the field instructor will talk about it in supervision with the student, and then the liaison will actually review it and assign the formal grade. How do we know if a student is doing well? We actually provide guidance to our field instructors on evidence that will show us that you as a student are progressing and learning in the way that we hope that you will be. We want to see that students are demonstrating knowledge or skills in their assignments. There are some agencies that use audio taping or sometimes videotaping with clients' permission, so that students have the opportunity to take a look at how they're performing in the context of meeting with clients. We're also going to be looking at documentation or observed contacts with clients and colleagues. We ask our field instructors to evaluate students, remember, on that professional piece, to see how well students are performing in the various roles that they take while they're in field. We'll know that competencies are being accomplished because we're inviting our field instructors to be specific and offer measurable content in their feedback. And we've specifically designed activities that you selected in your learning agreement that are measurable, observable, and that are measuring behaviors. Now, the thing to remember with assessment is we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking to see that you have mastered every behavior from the very beginning. We understand that it is an ongoing developmental process that will continue not only into the next semester, but into your advanced year, and even more in your career. One of the wonderful things about social work is that we continue to develop throughout our careers, and we learn from our mistakes. And so there may be some times where you've made a mistake, but you've demonstrated competency because of your ability to recognize the mistake you made, find a place for it in the context of your development, talk with your clinical supervisor about it, your field instructor about it, and then incorporate that learning into further work with clients. So let's take a look at a couple of examples where that might happen. The blue guy in the slide says, "I should not have given out my cell phone number." Well, when you think about what the problem might be with giving out a cell phone number, then you're going to be thinking about what areas of competency you might need to reflect on to say, what is the problem with giving out my cell phone number? That's exactly the process that we're looking for. Though in your inexperience, you may give out a personal cell phone number, your recognition of that being in error is part of your progress and your developing learning. Let's take a look at the green guy. I change the subject when they mention X. Now, green is recognizing that in the context of a therapeutic session, green, not the client, but green is actually changing the subject whenever a certain subject comes up. This can happen sometimes for new therapists who don't always realize that a particular topic or issue could be difficult for them. By saying that you recognize that you're changing the subject, you're actually showing competency because you're recognizing that there's something about you that's making you change the subject. Let's take a look at the third one, the red one. How can I engage a parent when I am not a parent myself? Now, this is a really critical question. There are some times when beginning therapists realize that in order to form a bond or begin to engage with and build rapport with the client, they need to identify with the client's experience. This isn't always the case. It is very possible to be a therapist for a client and not share in the client's experience. So this question shows that Red is thinking about how to take those steps to separate from the client, but allow for the client's experience to be prioritized. These three examples are things that we would like to see our students chatting about in supervision with their field instructors and demonstrating competency in their development and realization of what they're learning in the context. The next step in this process is then to actually identify which core social work competency is being demonstrated in each of these three examples. If you take a look at them, they're all pretty clear examples of issues that may come up for new therapists, students, that may be discussed in supervision, and where you have the opportunity to explore more closely how they're related specifically to competency. When you're assessed by your field instructor, we would also want your field instructor to be able to demonstrate which competencies are reflected. Let's take a look at the blue example. I should not have given out my cell phone number. There are two competencies that are reflected in that statement. The first is the competency 1, which refers to ethics. Blue has crossed a boundary, and crossing boundaries is an ethical problem. So in recognizing that that boundary was crossed, Blue is demonstrating competency that sharing a personal cell phone number is probably not a good idea. The other consideration is under Competency 8, which is taking a closer look at the treatment of the client. What is the best process for treating the client? Is it sharing a personal cell phone number, which could effectively be offering too much support and crossing a boundary with the client, or would it be encouraging the client to behave more independently? Giving out a personal cell phone number is not an effective response to the problem. Taking a look at green, I change the subject when they mention X. This is a use of self-reflection, which comes under Competency 1 for ethics. Green's ability to recognize green's impact on the therapeutic process is a very important and critical step. It's also a reflection of Competency 9, where you're evaluating your practice. When you're recognizing that you're changing the subject, which is effectively changing the course of treatment for your client, you're reflecting on the treatment you're providing to the client, and in doing so, evaluating your practice. On the third one, for red, how can I engage a parent when I am not a parent myself, is a reflection of engaging with diverse clients when looking at it from the student perspective. The student's not a parent, and the student's working with someone different from him or herself. And in doing so is recognizing the diversity between him or herself and the client. It also comes under Competency 6, where the student is engaging with an individual and reflecting on how best to engage with an individual client, and recognizing how can I engage this client who is a parent, perhaps that parenting issues are part of the issue, when I'm not a parent myself and I can't personally relate to whatever my client is bringing to me. A student's ability to recognize all three of these examples is critical to their competency. And if I were a field instructor working with any one of these students, I would be very impressed with the competency they're demonstrating by their mistakes. Now we're going to take a look at the more specific ratings that we're asking our field instructors and liaisons to provide with regard to the student experience. We use a Likert scale rating system, and this slide demonstrates what each one of those ranks is. We use no opportunity because we do realize, too, that you're in field throughout the year. And when you're in field throughout the year, you won't always have opportunities on every occasion to work on all 31 behaviors. Knowing that this is a reality, we sometimes do see no opportunities on the fall assessment. What we want to make sure of, however, is that in the beginning of the spring, the field instructor and the student, and perhaps a liaison, sit down to take a closer look at any areas of no opportunity that came up from the previous semester to ensure that they get to those opportunities in the spring. By the end of the year, we prefer to not see any no opportunity ranks on the assessment. We want to make sure our students have every opportunity available to address all 31 behaviors under the 9 competencies. Aside from that, there is a 5-point review of student performance, from unsatisfactory to outstanding. We provide guidance on what each one of these rankings means so that field instructors and students together can have a clear understanding of how a student has performed under each one of the behaviors. I'd like to point out, too, that perhaps the rating that is most confusing for students and can sometimes be discouraging is the rating called developing. Basically, developing is a reality, especially for a foundation student who's entering social work for the very first time. A field instructor may issue a score of developing with the understanding that the student is generally doing fine. The student may not be jumping up and down and perfect, but the student is also not performing poorly. And the thing to remember is that getting a developing score means that you're on track and you're doing fine. What you want to see is taking a look at that developing score and in the next semester working to bring it up to proficient or even outstanding. The assessment is in the Electronic Field Notebook, or EFN, and the cover page of the assessment includes guidance and information to the field instructor and the student about each one of these ratings. You'll see on the left-hand part of the slide, too, where there is a navigation bar that shows each tab of the assessment and each competency that's being delivered and evaluated as part of your assessment. You entered the Electronic Field Notebook by going to the University of Maryland website, clicking on Academics and selecting Field Education. And when you get on the Field Education page, you want to click the icon for Current Students. Once you do that, you will have the opportunity to sign in to your own portal in the electronic field notebook. This is what that login page looks like. You want to make sure that in order to get into your electronic field notebook, that you enter your UMB ID and the same password that was set up with your UMB ID. These are the same login ID and passwords that you used to do your field application. If you're like me, you probably sometimes forget your ID, or especially your password. But don't worry, we do have backup. If you ever forget your ID or password, you can contact the help desk at 410-706-HELP, help. I mentioned, once you've logged in, this page might look familiar to you because it'll be the same page that you entered when you did your field application. And you'll see to the left, in the upper left-hand corner, there's actually a link to the field application. You've been there before. Now that you're in field, you have the opportunity to navigate through the other links in the navigation bar, and then you'll see the one there for Final Field Assessment. This is the link where you will find your field instructor's assessment of your performance. When you take a look at it, you click on that link, it'll bring you to this page that will show you the overview, and then when you go into each competency tab, what each tab looks like. The thing to pay attention to on this slide is that our assessment is directly linked to our learning agreement. You'll see at the top of the page, the learning agreement will look familiar to you, and the text in red actually shows when you selected those specific activities to work on as part of your performance review. At the bottom of the page, when you click on the assessment, you'll see not only the learning agreement at the top, but you'll see those behaviors on which you will be evaluated as they relate to the activities that you selected and competency under that specific competency. There are 9 competencies, and you'll see that there are 9 tabs for each competency. Each behavior receives its own rating. We reviewed the ratings earlier, and you'll see here that this is what it actually looks like in the EFN. Our example is for Competency 6, and you'll see that in this example there are 2 behaviors where this student was evaluated in the fall as developing and then proficient, and then the student improved in the spring to proficient and outstanding. This, of course, is the ideal. We want to see that our students are performing well enough in the fall and improving their performance going into the spring. The thing for your field instructor to remember as they're completing each of these competencies is that they click the Save and Next button so that any rating they put in on each of the competencies is saved into your assessment. There are some folks who still want to take a look at things on paper, and this is okay. I advocate for that too. So though everything on the electronic field notebook is online and electronic, you do have the opportunity to print your field assessment if you prefer to have it on paper in front of you. This can also come in handy when you review your assessment with your field instructor so that you have your assessment right in front of you instead of having to squish together to see it on a screen. You'll see on the bottom left-hand corner that printing the field assessment is an option for you. And when it prints, it gives you all the information you'll need with regard to your assessment. Once again, the whole point of doing an assessment is for your field instructor to provide feedback to you on each behavior towards competency in your performance. We ask our field instructors to provide specific feedback. And you can see on this slide, though it's a little blurry, that the field instructor at the very bottom of the page has added quite a bit of narrative in providing feedback to the student on their performance. We encourage our field instructors to take notes and provide additional feedback in addition to the ratings that they're giving on each behavior. This gives students the opportunities to more clearly understand the basis for any field instructor's evaluation, And it gives the field instructor an opportunity to explain what evidence or what they reviewed in order to make the determination of the rating they selected. Each behavior will get one of these ratings. We ask our field instructors to provide comments at the end. The liaison will then review all the ratings and all the comments. The liaison may also add comments. And then at the end of the day, the field instructor will recommend a grade of pass or fail, and the liaison will actually assign the final grade. It is the liaison who provides your grade to the registrar and makes it official on your transcript.